and welcome to this Rain Taxi virtual event. I'm Eric Dorber, the director of Rain Taxi. We are a nonprofit organization that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. If you don't yet know much about us, I invite you to check out our website anytime after this event to learn more about our quarterly magazine of critical writing, our chapbook publishing, and the many events we host throughout the year, in addition to other advocacy programs. Whether you're an occasional visitor or you'd like to become a member, we'd love to have you along for the ride. To do everything we do, Rain Taxi earns funding from places such as the National Endowment for the Arts and the Minnesota Institute. But our most important funders are individual readers like you. So if you're able to pitch in a little something at this free event, feel free to use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. And please know that even a small gift makes a big difference. There are many other ways to participate. The chat column is a great place to share observations and thoughts, comments, insights. If you have a question for our authors today, use the Ask a Question box, and we'll get to those at the end of the event. And then, of course, the best button of all is buy the book. And today, if you hit that button, you'll be getting a copy of Train Music, fresh out from Dawn Publishing, and believe me, you want a copy of this as you're soon about to see. With this book in my hands, it's such a pleasure to welcome Cecil Giscombe and Judith Margolis. These are two authors very special to me because I first discovered each of their work because simply of the opportunity to review their books here at Rain Taxi. In Cecil's case, that happened in 1998 when we reviewed Giscombe Road, and been a faithful reader ever since. In Judith's case, it happened just recently in 2020, a turbulent year to be sure, but a book that helped me out a lot was called Life Support: Invitation to Prayer. And so it's been a joy to discover with the publication of this book that these two amazing creators are in fact friends and collaborators, and we get a chance to hear about that and celebrate this release today. So Cecil, Judith, welcome.
Yeah. I think, can we see Cecil? It looks like his computer might not have caught up yet. Is that correct?
No, yeah, we're all here.
You can see.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't see. It doesn't matter, I guess.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Well, we see you both vibrantly.
Good.
I'll tell the audience, as if they don't already know, that Cecil's beaming in from California, and Judith, it looks like, are in your studio in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So we're all in different time zones here together due to the miracle of technology, which in a book that feels like it's about the entire world is, I'm going to say, one of many undercurrents there that sort of gathering beyond time. But to launch into this, I'd love for each of you to just tell us briefly, a little bit more about your practice, your friendship, and how you came to the point to embark on a 4-day train trip across the United States together and create this book.
Okay.
Judith, why don't you?
Should I begin?
Please.
Cecil and I know each other from way back in Ithaca, New York. He was the editor of Epoch magazine, and he used to publish my art on the covers years ago when I can't even tell you how great it was. I got $20 a cover when he did it, and it was great. Anyway, we stayed in touch, and years later, we encountered each other when he was teaching at Penn State, and we've collaborated on a number of projects. But if you want to put on the picture of Intro to Us, and that shows perhaps. Is that on? Because I'm afraid I'm not seeing the images.
We have it up now, Judith. Yes.
Okay. So we chose this picture to be one of the first pages, one of the first images in the book, and it's actually from a book that I worked on. A lot of the images in the book are from other places. It's unusual collaboration in that I'm not illustrating his poetry, but we're putting side by side my work and his words. And so this image is a little bit of an indication of him and I both being itinerant people. Cecil, do you want to speak? And I think I'm going to have to log in and log out again in order to get things working. So.
Okay, we'll see you in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just to comment on that, on what Judith just said, it seems to me, and we have different reactions, I suppose, to all sorts of things, including this picture. The thing that I've thought about, a similar reaction, thought about most recently in terms of this, which is, I believe, the first illustration in the book, is that at the core of both figures is a kind of restlessness, and the sleeping woman, that figure that occurs throughout the book in Judith's paintings and drawings, it recurs. It toggles with the idea of rest, and a thing contains its opposite, right? Restlessness, and that's what the male figure suggests to me as well. Somebody who is itinerant, perhaps, but somebody who's restless, who's on a journey that, and as they say, and he's taking his lunch with him. He's bringing stuff that he's going to need for the journey, and so those two figures, connect. I think very much to, our to the two sensibilities that I see, and the two complicated sensibilities, I would say, that occur, or that take shape, as it were, in the train music book.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're right that it's such a powerful first image, and I think I can tell you as a reader that yeah, we sort of sense that these figures are maybe stand-ins in some way for the poet and the artist as on this journey together. And while we wait for Judith, maybe you can say a little bit more about, was there a plan to make this book? What was the process like from that point of view?
A, a, a plan, Eric? Come on, man. uh, well, I'll say a few things about all of this at this point. And first of all, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Rain Taxi, for getting us out to, virtually anyway, to Minneapolis.
Okay.
And hello to all my friends in Minneapolis. Those of you who were there. In the last couple of days, I've been looking at my notes about the trip, from the trip, on the trip, and so forth, and from my journal, which I've been a dogged journal writer for a long time. Journal from the trip across the country, and I'll talk about a little bit about some of the stuff that's not making it it didn't make it rather into the book. There's the account, which I discovered this morning, of a conversation with a friend who had just read Zora Neale Hurston's book about Haiti and Jamaica, a book called Tell My Horse. And he said, it's a book that changes everything. And he and I talked about the necessity of what, as we talked, I called field work. And Tell My Horse is the book that I'm reading finally now, mornings in bed before coffee. And Zora Neale Hurston wrote of the Loa, the God spirit, that Gade is a powerful Loa who manifests himself by mounting a subject as a rider mounts a horse. Then he or she speaks and acts through his mount. The person mounted does nothing of his own accord. He is the horse of the Loa until the spirit departs. And so maybe this book, this train music, is a bit of the field work for the book that I'm writing now, in which I address the various things the railroad has been to me, racial things, sexual things, geographical things, things that brush against spirit, stuff. I hope that'll go through metaphor to get beyond metaphor in the next book. Now, Judith, you said something to me. We were, I believe, maybe in Pittsburgh, uh, between trains, and you said, "How do you get away with it?" I noticed, how do you get away? How do you get away with such books as the ones you concoct? Did you always do this way? That's a. I'm not sure that's exactly what you said, but that's the words to that, to that effect. And I guess for me, in
I'm
response to that,
afraid.
poetry is obsessive and it's wonderfully ragged, as a poet, the poet Shirley Williams said, describing what produced her own voice, "My wild and sullen head." And another poet,
Unfortunately, it's frozen for me and I can't hear you, so I don't know if you can hear me.
I'm saying something brilliant. It's all right.
Okay, now I can hear you again. I'm sorry. This is like, terrible. But anyway, I'm trying to stay cheerful in the face of technical problems here. Repeat, you said that I said to you, how do you get away with it? And I was referring to the fact, and I think that train music is an excellent example of it. I think that people don't know what to expect when they read this book. If you say poetry or you say train music, and then you give them the entire contents of your mind and history is what it is. It feels that way. Your
Uh,
ideas and your intellect and your heart. And it's not typical. I don't think it's typical. I might be wrong, but I think that. And yeah.
mhm. It's a bunch of things. It's the ragged, as you know, as Shirley Ann Williams said, it's the ragged and wild and sullen head. And another poet, Charles Olson, said, "One perception necessarily follows another." That's bounce goes down the down the page in unexpected ways, or so it seems. So it seemed to me. Um,
Fantastic. Judith, can you see the images now? Because I know you have some more
Yes,
to
I
share.
can. Yeah, I'm sorry that I missed what Cecil said, so I don't know if I'm going to repeat. But the thing is this: that we know each other for many years, and a poet and an artist who live, I think, no matter how, no matter what a nice house we live in, or we have jobs or whatever, we're not like regular people. And in a way, I'm speaking out to an audience, and I'm hoping that artists will respond to what we do and be encouraged and inspired by it, and not even inspired, but just encouraged to keep on doing what they're doing creatively. So putting work side by side, one of the Cecil mentions a question that we had an article conversation that we had in the state. And the people in our own place, and we're each traveling in our room or in our notebooks. And I think that the book is an offering of that to some extent. Is it possible to click down to the next picture or two? I wanted to. This is actually an excerpt from one of the projects that Cecil and I worked on called Gazetteer, in which he would describe to me dreams that he had about travel, and I would make maps to go with those dreams. That work is available on my website. You could see it. But this is an excerpt from one of the pieces. The drawing itself I did from my neighborhood where I was living at the time, overlooking the Negev. If you click down to the next picture, it gives you an idea. This is an important event that happened. This taken by surprise. I'm very much a believer in signs. The day before we left, we met in New York, and we were taking the Amtrak from New York to California. I was standing in front of the New York Public Library, and this beautiful creature was lying there dead. And a cop came over and picked it up, and I took a picture of it. It was beautiful. And the day we arrived in California, in Emeryville, as the train was pulling into the station, the same kind of bird, a raven, was dead in the front of the train. I happen to be a collector of dead bird images. I find them and I consider them little spirit messages of some sort. So this was relevant somehow, that I think that what we do is part of an energetic thing that's going on in the world, and we're reporting back from our individual places. If you go on to the next picture, I'll just kind of, so once years ago, I think that when, I'll risk saying something about Cecil, let's say, addresses issues of race and dislocation. And a lot of my work has to do with grief. And I was widowed and traveling on a train, and I had no art supplies with me. I only had a ballpoint pen and a piece of cardboard that I found underneath the seat. And I did this drawing, and it's called Learning to Live Alone with Only the Moon for Company. And it turned out to be one of the most significant drawings I could do. It takes away that idea that you have to have a studio or expensive material to do something worthwhile, and it explained to me that I had work to do and that I needed to stay alive to do that. If anybody, God forbid, has dealt with grief or loss, then you know that sometimes the question comes up, well, what's the point? If you want to click on to the next picture. So where I lived until a few years ago, now I live in Jerusalem and more in the city, but I lived here, and there's the next one too, the next picture also. It's called The Point. From there, I could see Jordan and the Dead Sea, and I would go in the morning before sunup when it was not too hot and draw. And I wanted to show this because the drawings that did it on the train, traveling through the landscape of America, is so significant to me, having grown up in America, traveling a lot back and forth. I used to, I was during the counterculture years of living on the road when gas was 16 cents a gallon. I kid you not. Anyway, the next picture, please. So when Cecil said to me, he thought I should take a train ride all the way from California to New York, which I had never done. This was before our trip. I saw this picture in my mind, and I was always wishing that, can't this happen to us when we meet the wrong person or about to make the wrong decision? How come this sign doesn't come up in our foreheads? And I got the notion that it would be very frightening. And then I ended up taking the trip anyway, and it was excellent. So I always am grateful to Cecil for having gotten me to take that first long distance trip. You can go on to the next picture. So one of the things that happened while I was on the trip was I was walking around. You would get to stop for 15 or 20 minutes. And I was looking at this train, taking a picture of it. And then the next one, this woman walked in front of my camera. I have no idea. I had no idea when I took the picture that I was going to capture her. And this didn't end up being in our book, but it's something that one of the exciting and wonderful things that happen when we travel that we can't predict. You can go on now. So early on, that time when I found the ballpoint pen and did the drawing, I used to travel with a little package of art supplies or things to do. And this is a picture of me on one of those trains. And this was one of the PR pictures that we used. I guess I'm saying that it was partly through Cecil's influence. I was already taking train rides, but it wouldn't have occurred to me to take a very long one. And being an artist wherever you go and just taking whatever you do with you is the essential point, I think. Yeah, so we came together to do this. We started out thinking we would just use the drawings that I did on the trip. And then Cecil ended up suggesting that we look elsewhere in other things that I had done, which I'm grateful for. So, we're trying to crowd a lot into a little bit of time, and I want to hear him read. I think that him reading the poems help people understand what the poems are.
Absolutely. Thank you both. What great insight and background into what led to this. Cecil, go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of real quick things to add to Judith's talk there, which is totally wonderful. And although I'll pick a bone with you about the bird. That was actually not a raven, but a hawk. It's a red-tailed
hawk. Absolutely right. I made a mistake. You're right.
No worries. People do, and and I think you mentioned the interesting thing that there was the hawk that Trisha Peck pulled from the grill of the locomotive when she picked us up at the train station. So it seemed like those were bookends. It was the same sort of her. And she and I in our travels, had encountered many she and I had many experiences with with hawks. And as I think about birds, I think ravens. I'm reminded that in my journal that I looked at again this morning, there's a lot of music in the book and in the journal as well. One of which is the song "The Flying Crow Blues," bringing it back to Raven, as it were. An old blues song, "Washboard Sam." You can find it on YouTube. The Flying Crow. It's the name of a train on the Kansas City Southern. The flying he sings. I'm not going to try to sing it for you. The Flying Crow leaves Port Arthur, comes to Shreveport to change her crew. Flying Crow leaves Port Arthur, gone to Shreveport to change her crew. She will take water at Texarkana. Yeah, boys, then keep on through. And so it's that sort of thing that I tried to address in the book. And there's the railroad back in those days there were two crack passenger trains. One was the Flying Crow, the other was the Southern Belle. And I'm interested by the racial dichotomy of the names of those two trains, which I find amusing in kind of a very somber way. My own life with trains, and it took me 2 days, as I recall, Judith, to get you onto that train for the first time.
I was terrified.
You're terrified, but I've been taking trains for many decades. I've simply never stopped. I managed to cross the country. Managed to cross the country by train almost every year, maybe sometimes twice during the year. COVID has slowed that down; it hasn't stopped it. And I have a memory of the Jim Crow stations in Birmingham. My memory is quite intact. I think I was 11, maybe 12 when the white and colored signs came down. But for me, more recently, on the Starlight, the Amtrak train from Seattle down to Los Angeles, things happen on trains. I found myself exchanging nods in the club car, with a woman we'd never met. Little flirtatious, perhaps, on both of our parts. But when we finally shared a table after many hours, it took us 3 minutes to figure out that her father and uncle had taught me to swim 50 years earlier in Dayton, Ohio. We'd never met before. Bev Anderson. We're Facebook friends at this point. Judith and I agreed to travel together from New York City to San Francisco. We had family connections in both places, and it was holiday season. She'd draw and I'd write, and we'd see what happened. But this was early, as you remember, this was early in the Trump administration, and I'd agreed to, upon my return to Berkeley, to address a roundtable at my university, a roundtable on white supremacy, which some people had just discovered, and I was the only black person on the roundtable, and it did not go well at all. So the writing that had begun on the train morphed to address that, along with that failure of as they said in the movies, we have a failure to communicate, along with everything else. I can read some poems, or something more to say.
No, please do, because again, you're both giving us a sense. As I said earlier, I feel like everything is in the book, and you're sort of showing how that works, like how one's entire history and being comes into funnels into a project like this, and it's truly exciting. So we're eager to hear it. I'll tell the audience that while you read, we'll show images from the book, because this is sort of the experience of the book too, to have both text and image happen. So by all means, please read a poem.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read. Their sections are numbered, uh, but they kind of flow or they don't flow. This is early in the book, as it talks about the beginnings of the trip, and I should mention that for some reason I was told childhood stories of sharks coming up rivers. Oh, to eat unsuspecting people, and those were true stories, but they've blazed through my childhood for some reason, even though we lived in Ohio. And I would also mention that Bertolt Brecht and the Moritat das Machi Messer, also known as Mac the Knife, popular song by Bobby Darin, and by Ella Fitzgerald as well. And I would also mention in this William Blake. I was an English major, sorry. And Blake's great poem, The Proverbs of Hell. One of the Proverbs of Hell is to expect poison from standing water. So I'm quoting all these people in this thing. And let's see. Yeah, late morning, New York, excuse me, late morning, New York Penn, Newark, Trenton, those stations. Then into the 30th Street station, Philadelphia, by 12:15. Electric locomotive from New York Penn to Philly, having crossed New Jersey behind that locomotive under catenary. Stories, cautionary tales swept through childhood. Keep your head above water. Surprise, sometimes, a history of shark presence, even in fresh waters. The figure on which such tales were based. Train leapt the filthy Passaic, mindless, nesting place, haunt, contagious, or seemed to. Train crossed the Delaware River, the Raritan River, etc. Shark had come right up Matawan Creek out of Raritan Bay and ate 4. Pearly white on the History Channel. Changed the power at 30th Street, one diesel to haul us from there on out to Pittsburgh. Traveling, the schoolboys might say, some traveling subject, having agreed to address white supremacy upon my return to California at a round table. Symptom of what? Typical power, my agreeable nature fidgeting over the tracks. On the street and stations, unspoken of, standing water in ditches by the tracks. Feign my shock, expect me, something said. Feign my shark. Water just standing there, saying nothing. Remember me, said something else. Inure me, boys, to hardship and the peculiar apparition. Bless public affairs and public issues. I work around the place. And that's a fragment from the book. I could
Uh,
read something else real short if you'd like.
uh, yes, we would like, but let's pause for just a moment to take some of that in, because um, uh, uh, first of all, it's marvelous, and it's early in the book. I have to say uh, you've answered that it's certainly not a literary conceit. It's an actual fact that you're en route to speak about white supremacy, but it it haunts the book that this is waiting for you at the end of this journey, and I'm just curious how something like that plays out in the composition process, whether it's um, the choice of the fragmentary text that comes in, or in Judith's case, whether it's the choice of images. It was great to hear that you reveal that some of these images are coming from previous work, previous collaborations, in addition to work being created on the train, actually. So how did some of that come together, and maybe even in some of the images we saw while Cecil read?
Um, for me, composition, it's as they said time is a river without banks, right? And everything comes to comes together. Uh, the stuff that I mean, the train experience for me is like totally basic. It's like on the train, and stepping from one car to the other. I can go on for a very long time, longer than we have, much longer than we have about trains. Um, there are obviously things of incredibly complex beauty. Um, but the but there's, and as you said, there's something waiting for me at the other end, and I hear the music from Jaws, dun 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 dun, and the sharks come right up from that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Uh, yeah. And Judith, any thoughts on the in for example, in one of those images, uh, the integration of the sort of ballpoint figures with the probably crayon or oil or vibrant colors, and it's um, it feels like there's a lot going on. There's a lot of psychic weight in an image like that.
Well, first of all, at least some of that sequence, I wasn't sure when I put them together what we would be saying, so there would have been some explanation. But what I'm thinking, what Cecil's reading reminded me of when we were sitting in the station, I think it was in Pittsburgh, there was a large screen and there was a program on, if you recall. I think we talked about it or was going on, and it was some kind of legal thing going on, maybe. Do you remember?
I do.
And maybe you make a reference of it, I think, also in the text.
I do.
And it seemed to me, and then interactions happened while we were traveling of people saying bizarre things to us. I think people were a little, you sit at a dining room table with other people that you don't know. And sometimes people say, who are you? What do you do? And they would ask questions of us. And I think we didn't quite fit into what people expected, or I have no idea. It was every minute it seemed to me was like being in a dream, where it doesn't quite make sense, but it could be psychically really valuable and important to know. And I feel that's what I was trying to say about the writing, is that when you write, it feels to me like you're drawing upon every single thing, everything you've ever read and everything you've ever thought, and also what you're going toward. And our landscape that we were traveling through kind of was holding us and showing us that constantly. It's pretty intense. It's pretty intense. And one of the reasons I wanted to show the picture of me, at the point overlooking the wilderness, is because I had been living a life of solitude and, not too much, not seeing people too much. And then here I am on a train traveling through this landscape surrounded by people in history, basically. And all of our conversations seem to be about everything. Like just now when you were reading, you mentioned in your reading, you quote the schoolboys. Do you mention a reference to schoolboys?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, when you say, this is a question, I guess, do you still feel like one of those schoolboys? Like, are you talking to yourself, a younger self, or is it really others that you're speaking to?
That's others I'm speaking to. The kind of the well met, the eager, smart young people in at good schools, sort of thing.
Like your teacher, like your students, for example?
Not not so much students, but maybe the kind of very uh, genteel folks. The well educated, which I'm addressing now in some other writing I'm doing.
Mm.
One wishes for one wishes for the well educated reader. Ha, not really.
Well, Judith's comments about everything maybe is the perfect segue to that short piece you want to lay on us, Cecil. Short in length, massive in what it's drawing on, and so I'll turn it back to you to read that.
Okay, it's real short, and it's borrowed language. I mean, I don't think I wrote. I just stapled some stuff together, and it's where is it? it's section 13, I believe. So if that, I think there's an image that on the facing page.
Mm.
Not quite that one.
Yeah, number 13.
Can I just say briefly, just very briefly, this particular drawing, which I wanted to say something about, I write, you see a little glimpse of my journal, so it's not just the drawing, but I was also keeping a journal, and I write something like Grand Junction was not so grand anymore because we got to stand outside for 15 minutes. No offense if anyone from Grand Junction happens to be in the audience here, but I just felt that every place, I think I mentioned this to Cecil when we were talking about preparing, his mentioning the names of the stations, that to me was music also, to hear the sounds of these places, and each place becomes a memory. If you've lived there, of course, it's nostalgia. But if it's just the sound of a place and you're passing by, it felt very. I don't even have a word for it. It was very grand. The trip was grand, even if Grand Junction wasn't grand. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Grand Junction's not that great. I remember I've stopped there many times. It's Grand Junction, Colorado, by the way.
Yes.
And
What did I say? I make a mistake.
No, you didn't.
Okay, thank you.
The state. And yeah, it's the poem on page 39. It starts off with a quote from a book I had as a child about train travel, and then it quotes Melville from Moby Dick, and then it quotes Ralph Ellison. And what Ellison wrote is in the 1940s. He said whenever, essentially, back in the day, back in the 1940s, when black people and liberal white people would kind of get together and very nervously talk about white supremacy, Ellison referred to it as we're gonna beat that boy. Beating the boy is what the talk was. So I was going back to California to beat that boy. The porter starts off, quote, "The porter is the colored servant on the train," end quote. It's from my childhood book. Melville, the unsounded ocean you gasp in is life. Those sharks, your foes. Those spades, your friends. And what between sharks and spades you are in a sad pick, and what between the and what between sharks and spades you are in a sad pickle and peril, poor lad. Beat that boy, Mr. Ralph said. So,
Amazing. And thank you for revealing the sources in this case. And again, I just want to tell the audience that the notes for this book are important to read, to draw on these sources, both textually and I found myself looking at the illustrations and what materials were in them and so forth. So it becomes a really essential part, I feel. But that poem is such a great example of these disparate elements in the world sort of colliding, and you're renowned for this kind of this collage element, this documentary poetics. How does bringing it to this project that becomes a collaboration, does it change it in any way?
what complicates it?
Okay.
In ways that are necessary. We have to. I'm not a storyteller, but there is the story of the train, the trip itself, and then we have the progression, of Judith's paintings, paintings and drawings, and so it's the necessarily alternative, not opposite, but alternative, kind of story as it were.
Yeah.
That thread or threads that go that that share they share the stage. They're different different sensibilities. Talking at the same time, and they don't resolve. which is just fine.
They don't.
Actually, it makes me think of people sitting side by side in a train, and let's say they're each looking out the window, seeing the same landscape, but having an entire world happen while that's going on.
Yeah.
So a lot of the references that I have to a woman's experience or woman's sensuality or the history that I experienced, and it just feels like it's there to experience, but it's not explained really.
Ah, very good. Excellent. Yeah.
Right. Crucial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I love about that image too, Judith, is it's dreamlike in its own way. The cardinal directions and the sort of mountain topography in the thing that they don't quite follow world logic, but maybe a dream logic. And Cecil earlier spoke about that recurring image in your artwork of the restless figure sleeping or trying to sleep, and so it's another beautiful collision, the sort of dream world and the what Cecil is saying is the sort of maybe more familiar world to him of being on a train for days across the country. Is there another piece you wanted to read as well?
I mean, I could read for a long time, but
One more.
what do I have that's short?
Read from the beginning.
From the beginning?
Yeah.
I don't like the beginning that much.
You don't like the beginning. You're telling people you don't like the beginning.
Right. Oh, real briefly.
It does start on a sour note. It's true.
Oh, ha 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 ha. Yeah. Sure. It's predictive. I'll read that. And I don't like it that much.
Actually, with your permission, I'll do a little setting for it. We left on the day after Thanksgiving, and everyone traveling, all these Americans or people who are in America traveling on the day after Thanksgiving. Many people who shared the table with us, if you recall, Cecil, particularly the women, were complaining about how horrible it had been to spend time with their families. And like they were leaving the day after so as not to spend the whole weekend. It was a recurrent theme, actually. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, it's always.
You open up to strangers, you open up to strangers and you tell them the truth. So.
Okay. Well, let that be a lead into to this one then from later in the book. Train wears a big old mask. The train's in disguise. The train is disguise. The train on the runway like a boa constrictor. No safe seats, I'd say. No safe seats in the California ballroom. But unlike old times elsewhere, it was soon forgotten. Watch italics, boys. Train striding up on California like a bad sport. Some of us, though, had learned how to do or how to keep it in on the side, and quoting Gwendolyn Brooks, white speech, say, on the streets south of the Art Institute, how to make a look an omen, Miss Brooks had said. Besides the world, the head of a Negro having been the study for Watson and the shark, that Negro upright and ambiguous in the boat, Copley's Negro subject to interpretation. Look at that shark. Look at him with his great nostrils all flared. Do you know how to speak? The critic asked, is the boy, young Watson, going to be saved? And answered in her own next sentence, the black figure seems in doubt. Ride the heated dance, Mr. Bear. I don't do diversity work, the colored poet had said to me on the telephone at SFO.
Yeah, it's powerful, haunting. Those you spoke a little earlier about this, Cecil, but the joining textual material to something as sort of prosaic as a phone conversation, but that becomes very unprosaic in when we focus on what it's saying and when it's saying it, as you mentioned during the agony of the previous administration and the current moment in general. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, can you speak a little just about the risk in a way of drawing on those sorts of disparate sources?
Oh, I don't know. As you talk, I wonder, is World War III starting?
Huh.
We're there. I don't know. I guess
Mhm.
everything, as somebody said, novelist Robert Stone said a long time ago, he said there's only one topic and it's the times. And so, we respond to those whether we wish to or not, and maybe try to be as conscious of them, of the situation that 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 chooses us, you know, that as we possibly can be. All the stuff, the huge stuff, the huge issues, the gender issues, the race issues, the class issues, which people do not talk about.
Right. And the train, as Judith mentioned earlier, meeting strangers on the train.
Mhm.
There's a moment in the book where you are in the sleeper car, you two are in the sleeper cars, and you're going to the club car and realizing the people in the non-sleeper cars are coming in it from the other direction, and it's sort of like this weird social hierarchy that is
Oh, yeah.
even there.
Worlds colliding, we call it. I call it.
Yeah.
Colliding. Yeah, yeah, uh, absolutely. Um, yeah, I just can't say enough about what an extraordinary book it is. I want to ask uh, Judith, because I feel like when we hear Cecil read, it's so evident the rhythms of the train in the work. Uh, do those rhythms, being on that train, which was a less familiar experience for you for that long, do you feel that any of those rhythms affected how you made art?
While on the trip or in general?
While on the trip or after? Yeah.
And actually, would it be possible for me to be speaking while we scroll through? Because that exactly addresses some of the other pictures that I wanted to see. Yeah, okay, so this is a good one. It's called Still Trying to Sleep like a Normal Person. I personally, it's people who know me know I have I stopped calling it insomnia because it seems like a bad thing, but I don't sleep very much. And so I'm often up at night. And a lot of the drawings I did of the woman asleep in this, what looks like a small car, I did it not on the train. The experience of being on the train was confirmation that all these images that I had done over and over again were like this experience that I was going to have. Do you want to go on and show another picture? So this is the kind of drawings that I did while I was traveling. I would have a few seconds to get an image, and then I could work sometime. You want to advance, and then let's see. Okay, so this is a photograph that did not make it. It's just glorious. I really part of my enthusiasm here is to try to get people to take a long train ride, so you get to see these amazing images. Next one, please. The next one. So this is an image, a typical image. The tethering of this um, electric pole seemed to me so emblematic of what we were doing. On the one hand, we're traveling and we're moving. On the other hand, each of us, both Cecil and myself, we carry with us our thoughts and our ideas and the fears and the whatever, and we take it with us and we're held down by it. Anyway, go on. There's another drawing. There's actually a drawing. So this was one that did not make it into the book, but it was to my mind what the pictures would look like. And you could see it's ballpoint pen. There's that shiny fluorescent image of a big pen. And it catches a little glimpse of this corner of this town, which is pretty typical, I think. Yeah, I want to remind people that I'm an expatriate from America, which I adore and lived in all my life, and now come back, and these landscapes, these images are so filled with nostalgia and I'm embracing it. Just the way the house looks. This looks like a normal house. That looks like a normal landscape. Normal isn't the right word. It's just recognizable. I think there might be another picture to show. No, the other way. Is that it? Is that the last one? Anyway,
Yeah.
I guess I felt like somebody mentioned collage. Also, I work with collage. Also, the thing about collage is when you're working in collage, and I think that actually you used it to describe Cecil's work as being, you take an image from here and you have a memory over there and you have an impulse over there and you make something up. You bring it together and it makes a new reality, which is exactly how we dream. When we dream, there are images and thoughts and stuff. Some of it is based on real life and some of it is who knows from where. And so that's one of the reasons why I love collage, and one of the reasons why I thought that, although it's complicated, and it's this is a good example of that. That's one of the reasons why I thought that bringing his text and my art together without too much explanation or without trying to mess up was a really good idea. And I leave it to people to find the reference or the expression. So in this one, the woman is looking into a well. In fact, in real life, the well is a reference to a dream I once had, where there was a well, and I thought I heard my father's voice coming from in the well after he had died. And there's a line there. It says in Pain Pills. It says in one of the writing. It's like I tore up something. So for people who've had grief, or people who've dealt with addiction, or people who've dealt with being far from home, all of those ideas are what I'm speaking about. And I think that they go with what Cecil was at least thinking about. And Cecil, I wanted to ask you, when you said that you were looking forward to the event when you got back to California, were you, what's the word? Were you worried about it? Like, did it work? I can't think of the word. Were you apprehensive about it? Or not necessarily?
That's hard to say. Was I apprehensive about it? Sure, of course. It's always, you give a talk. You're always apprehensive about it. I'm apprehensive about this, So,
Right.
but it went worse than I had expected. I'd expected it to.
And that ended up affecting the book?
I'm sorry?
And that ended up having an impact on how the book turned out?
Well, that turned out to be what the book was about.
Mm-hmm.
in some, maybe the most profound way, in a very profound way.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Well, that sort of liminal space.
Go. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that there's that sort of suspended thought. I mean, as you were saying it, I was thinking, oh, in your reality, you're saying it didn't go as well as as you thought. The book has that sort of anxiety and comfort all colliding at the same time, and in our world, as you said earlier, that's the mission. That's life. That's the times. So I, for one, am grateful though that there are artists like you two to explore, essay into that, take these travels, and make this work. It's hard work. When I asked if you had this plan, it's sort of like, wow, this is a lot of hard work in this book, and to think that that any of it was done in the middle of a four-day train trip is remarkable and inspiring. So we're basically out of time, but I just want to thank you both from different cardinal directions coming to meet us here in Minnesota on the screen today. It's been a real pleasure having you, and I encourage everyone out there in the audience hit that buy the book button if you're interested. Get a copy of Train Music, hear it for yourself, see it for yourself, and do check out the other great author events we have coming up. It's going to be an exciting year. So thank you again to you two, and thank you all out there, and bid you all farewell.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Linda, and thank you. Who's the tech person? Thank you, Eric.
Our
And,
pleasure.
okay.